Hello and welcome to Building High Performance Cultures, a weekly series where we talk to executives from top organizations about how they've built high performance cultures and how they're leveraging their culture as competitive advantage. I'm Marty Parker, the President and CEO of Waterstone Human Capital, and I'm delighted today to have my guest and our guest as the President, Chief Executive Officer of Maple Leaf Foods, Michael McCain. Michael, welcome to Building High Performance Cultures.
Yeah, thank you, Marty. I'm glad to be here.
Now, Michael really has devoted his career to the food industry, starting in McCain, sorry about this, Michael, in the late 1970s, where he held a variety of roles, including President and Chief Executive Officer of McCain Foods USA. And then he joined Maple Leaf Foods with his family purchase of the business in what, Michael, 1995, sound about right?
95.
And he's been instrumental in establishing Maple Leaf as a very strong, sustainable, values-based company with a bold vision for the future, and of course, an award-winning corporate culture. Maple Leaf's a 5-time winner, in fact, and a Hall of Fame inductee of Canada's most admired corporate cultures. And this happened completely under Michael's leadership. Michael's also a director of McCain Capital, Maple Leaf Foods, the Royal Bank of Canada, and is a member of the Richard Ivey Business Advisory Board and the Business Council of Canada, and has had incredible work, which we're all thankful for, with the Center of Addiction and Mental Health Foundation, CAMH Foundation. He's also the honorary chairman of the Maple Leaf Center for Action on Food Security, and we're thankful for that as well. No, none more than in these days. Now, Michael, as I said, I don't think there's anyone out there that's unfamiliar with Maple Leaf Foods, but just in case, or some of our friends from other parts of the globe are following us along here, tell us a little bit about the company and where it is today, and more importantly, the culture that you've built there.
Okay, well, again, thank you, Marty, for having us organizing this conversation today. It's certainly a topic that is fundamental to me personally as the leader of the Maple Leaf organization, but fundamental to everybody in our team. So it's super important. Maple Leaf is one of Canada's largest food processing companies. We've got 100 years of history, lots of change that has been undertaken. Some we've engineered, some has been imposed on us over that 100-year history. I've been involved since 1995 in a leadership capacity, and we are today an organization that is focused largely on the protein business. We have a large business, a leadership position in meat protein, but also an emerging and high growth business in plant-based proteins. Our vision is to become the most sustainable protein company on earth, which is a important cornerstone of all of our business strategies and important to the people of Maple Leaf. We have now something in the vicinity of 13,000 employees operating over 25 facilities throughout North America, and our business is spread through North America and Asia and other parts of the world. So that's the high level view.
Well, thanks, Michael. And look, we were talking about this before we went on air, so to speak, and you are really, with maybe a handful of others like Izzy Sharp and a few others, a pioneer when it comes to culture. When we started talking about culture and in the early 2000s, you were one of the louder voices. But what I'm really interested in maybe kicking this off is, where did your views on corporate culture come from, and why, going all the way back, have you always seen it as important for leaders to be on the front line of culture and for organizational culture to really be the center driver behind performance?
Oh, that's a very important question, and I have to maybe answer that with some historical context, Marty. I came out of a private enterprise that my father and his brother built over a very long period of time, and I would tell you that in the 40 plus years that they operated that business together as partners, they never once used the C word of culture. They never once talked about company values. Never crossed the radar. There's no posters on the wall. There was nothing. Yet they had a profoundly well understood culture in their organization. All of which leads you to the conclusion that the behaviors of the leaders is the single most important attribute to culture development in an organization. And they were very clear over that 40-year history of their own behavior and the behaviors they expected of their teams in defining that culture. When we acquired Maple Leaf as an organization in 1995, one of the first observations I made with the board at the time was, I believed as a long-term owner-operator that our success was going to be ultimately defined by the people in our organization and the environment that they worked in and how they behaved together. But the observation at the time was that there really was no strong culture of the Maple Leaf organization. It was a disparate federation of businesses, if you will, and I remember identifying actually at least half a dozen unique cultures throughout the organization, all defined by the divisional heads, not one common bond. And I believed at the time, back in the late 90s, that was going to define our success. Was having the bond, the glue of a really powerful culture that was magnetic to the people inside the organization or people coming to the organization, and defined how we would work together. So because it was a re-engineering, if you will, of a common bond of an organization that we'd come into, as opposed to my father and his brother who built that organization brick by brick from the very first day they opened up the door. It was a different approach to building culture, and certainly recognized that we needed to manage it overtly, proactively manage it to achieve the outcomes that we wanted. So we started in that journey in kind of the late 1990s, and we've been at it ever since.
And that was kind of the origins behind things like the Leadership Edge and
Yeah.
a number of other things that you did at Maple Leaf that I think were the pinnacles behind what has led to the success, but also has, in many ways, taught us all some of the lessons behind how to align culture to drive performance. And on that note, it's amazing that the number of Maple Leaf alumni that have gone on to help other organizations build high performance cultures, a subset of those have gone on to win our Canada's Most Admired Award. So with that as a kind of a backdrop, Michael, how do you explain the way that kind of culture resonates at Maple Leaf, and what lessons do you think that people have taken away from that? Because clearly they have. There's something that has happened.
I've heard that a lot. Well, it's important to me, but it's important to everybody at Maple Leaf. I mean, we've made it the centerpiece of the time we spend together. Right? It's simple as that. I mean, at the end of the day, people are drawn to an organization where they can work professionally beside people in whom they're like-minded, right? That doesn't mean a lack of diversity in their thinking, but they're like-minded about how they work together. We very early on, Marty, we were clear on what culture meant to us, right? Everybody's got their own definition of what it meant to us. I think probably the simplest and best definition that we attach ourselves to is that culture is basically how people are going to behave when nobody's looking, right? And as a leader of the organization, that was really important to me because I'm not looking at everything all the time, and I really, really wanted to pay attention. We all wanted to pay attention. All the people on our team wanted to pay attention to, the behavioral attributes of the organization, right? And if we were aspiring to a high performance culture, which we have for all of these decades, how we behave together was fundamental to achieving the performance that we aspired to. And so like-minded people, right, gravitate to environments where they align with the behavioral norms of the organization, right? They find that they find that, intoxicating might be one word, but certainly they embrace it, and they find it as a very powerful inspiration in what they bring to their work each and every day, knowing that the environment that they work in, and recognizing if you have a high performance culture, we have high performance people on our team, and they have choice, right? Every one of these individuals, they get to choose where they commit their time each and every day of their professional lives, and they make that choice based on where they get the most satisfaction of working with like-minded people. And so with that, with that framework in mind, we've really concentrated on making it the glue, the glue of the organization. So we've managed it proactively through our HR systems. We talk about it all the time. I mean, it's not something that's a poster on the wall. It's part of our discourse every day that we come to the office, about attaching the behaviors of the organization to what we believe are the true north of our behaviors, defined by our leadership values and the culture of the organization. So I think people who have been part of Maple Leaf over the years have aligned on the reality that this is a powerful organizational medium of management, and carried that forward. So
have they ever? And in spades, I would say. Michael, centered to that, so much is centered to that. The leadership edge, the definition of the values. I'd never heard of, before I met you, measuring 50% of your performance measurement was on behavior, and the other on outcomes. I mean, that was pioneering. But talk a little bit, if you would, about your absolutely huge, deep, and unfettered commitment to leadership and management development, which I know continues today, and where that came from, and how that has been centered to that kind of, those behavioral kind of connections that drive performance.
Well, the only thing I'm going to take one piece of issue with the context that you're setting, Marty, that I think but it's an important point, is I actually don't believe that we've been pioneering per se. I think in the humblest of terms, I don't think I've had an original idea in my life, actually. So, there are many organizations that have managed their culture and their values very, very well. What I think has distinguished our history is that and this is integral to our culture, actually, is that we do try and find the best ideas that others maybe, and we execute like hell. So so there is a point of difference there, is that I think our commitment to culture and values is not original to us, but I think we've practiced it for so long and executed it so energetically that it's become that cornerstone that is unique. As far as our commitment to the people in the organization, the adjunct to strong culture is our willingness to invest in our people, and we made that early on because we were, if you connect the dots between a talent strategy and a strong culture for that talent to prosper and thrive in, it's a logical step is that our value proposition to that talent is not just the environment that they work in, but the fact that we're going to invest in their personal growth. And we've made over the last 25 years, we've made investing in talent part of the value proposition to attracting that talent. So the investment that we make through our leadership development processes, and they've morphed. We're on multiple generations of that that leadership investment framework. The value proposition to the individuals is the opportunity, is a company that invests in their growth, the opportunities for them to grow in the organization, and the environment that they are attached to and are attracted to. The value proposition for us as an organization is that obviously it's a great retention tool, as an organization, to say we've got a talented individual. It's part of the value proposition for them to both come to Maple Leaf and stay at Maple Leaf, is because, if we can address the question, we will invest in you, and your personal growth is certainly attractive to talent. But also, kind of the second agenda, which has been really powerful for us, is all of those leadership investment opportunities and touch points have been, yet another opportunity for us to teach, promote, find the cult and culture, if you will, around our leadership edge and our culture, our values, right? And so, we've made that a cornerstone for all of those reasons. The part of the human capital of our talent strategy, but also the ability to use that as a framework for teaching our culture.
Being the most sustainable protein company on earth is really one of your organization's goals. And last year, Maple Leaf Foods became the first major food company in the world to be carbon neutral. So how did this kind of significant focus on sustainability and climate come about, and how wasn't it, perhaps, I don't know, influenced by the culture at Maple Leaf Foods?
Let me answer the first part of that first, which is how the evolution of that in Maple Leaf. And over the last several years, our commitment to sustain, I should back up a bit, our commitment to sustainability dates back a long, long time, Marty, but it started out as the responsible thing to do. And over the last few years, actually, in an evolutionary way, it's actually progressed to a much higher level of both purposeful journey and the actual vision of this organization. All of which is to say, it's baked into everything that we do at this stage as the collective vision for Maple Leaf, and that's a super important distinguishing observation for our commitment to sustainability. The history of that is kind of rooted in a couple of thoughts. The first is a belief system in the organization that dates back generationally, actually, that the role of the enterprise is not just to serve the shareholders, that the primacy of shareholder value, that's day is gone, that the understanding of shared value with multiple stakeholders, and that is the ethos of Maple Leaf in our belief system, and shared value is a commitment that we've made to ourselves and to all of those stakeholders. Secondly, sustainability in our industry is more important than most. Climate change, as an example, is one of the greatest threats to humanity. The meat industry in particular is at the forefront as a protagonist in that dialogue. And we recognized early on that we could either be part of the problem or part of the solution. And our belief system of shared value led us to this space of both what the world needs, which is leadership and sustainability in the food industry and specifically in meat, but also what we were uniquely positioned to address. Which brings me back to our values. One of our values is, and part of our culture is doing bold things, right? We've always done it for all of our life. We've taken on bold ideas and bold initiatives and climbed big mountains together. It's part of our DNA. So as we thought through over the course of the last 5 years, particularly, this intersection between our belief system of shared value, what the world needs today in leadership in sustainability and what we're uniquely provided or positioned to solve, you know, basically our view was that our culture was the enabler, right? We said because we have a strong culture of performance that tackles big ideas, we think we can do this. We think we can become the most sustainable enterprise in protein on Earth. It's a big, bold idea. It's one that is super important to the world, and we felt that we could take it on. So the magic has been in making that not just a responsibility initiative, but baking it into the business strategies of the organization.
Right.
So that it becomes part of our growth. It's our growth algorithm today for Maple Leaf. All of the growth vectors that we built into the Maple Leaf organization are in some way connected to differentiating our business in the marketplace, connected to sustainability. And that's been, it's had enormous implications on our business. Number one is it's been a great strategic cornerstone for the business because that's where the consumer's heading, right? So it's been a great strategic pillar for us. But it's also been really amazing for our culture and values and the people in the organization because it's inspiring. You know, frankly, everybody in the organization finds a level of inspiration around that very purposeful journey of becoming the most sustainable protein company in the world. And you know, it's one other kind of underpinning for the culture that we have in the organization, and we're very proud of that.
And it immensely bold undertaking, I think, and an incredible outcome so far.
You did mention carbon neutrality, which you know our definition of sustainability, Marty, is very broad. So it's not just climate change.
Right.
We define it as kind of with 4 different pillars: better food, which is about we're in the food business, bringing more wholesome, natural, clean food, real food, being leaders in the real food movement as being fundamental to a sustainable food company. Number 2 is better care, which is animal care. We're in the meat business. It's really important to us and our stakeholders that we are leaders in animal care and the animals that are under our watch. Number 3 is better planet, or the climate component of it, and lastly, better communities and investing back in the communities that we operate in. So under that very broad definition of sustainability, in 2019, we became the very first food company, not just meat company, but food company in the world to be carbon neutral. And not carbon neutral in the future, but carbon neutral now. And that was a huge achievement for us, a huge statement to all of our stakeholders. You know, for a meat company to be the first carbon neutral food company in the world, again, aligned with our business strategy, aligned with our vision for the company, but also aligned with our values as a team was really meaningful for us. I think a really big step forward.
It really is an incredible achievement. Well, these are interesting times, you know, and many organizations today are really getting a taste of crisis management due to COVID-19. But, you know, Michael, 12 years ago, you not only got a crash course, but you rewrote the book on how to handle a crisis with the Listeria outbreak. And that is really, you've heard it 1,000 times, become the case study for how to handle a crisis. I started my career with Johnson & Johnson, and I'll never forget as a kid watching them deal with their Tylenol crisis, and then getting to see you deal with it and taking that to another step, I thought, in a Canadian context, was incredible. But for those who aren't familiar with the history, if you wouldn't mind, talk a little bit about that time at Maple Leaf and the lessons that you learned from that period that you're holding in good stead today as you navigate COVID-19.
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say, Marty, we don't love talking about that because it was a really dark period in our history, and it was nothing short of a tragedy. We're in the food business. We're very passionate and proud of what we do. Yet 23 people died on our watch. And we own that, and we wear that, and we will forever. So it was a very dark period in our history, and I think what I would say is that following that very dramatic outcome, we thought it was most important during that period of time to follow our core values and behave in a way that reflected our values. As I was taught as an infant, likely you were as well, by my grandmother, that it's not the mistakes you make in life, it's how you deal with the mistakes that you inevitably do make that matters. And that kind of message resonates with everybody at Maple Leaf, and we tried to handle that very difficult, dark situation and outcome that we were accountable for in a way that was consistent with who we were as an organization, the people of Maple Leaf. That meant to us that we had to accept accountability, because accountability is an essential part of our DNA. It meant to us that we had to be transparent in our approach, because transparency is part of our DNA. And it meant to us that we had to be action oriented. We couldn't just be reactive. We had to be very proactive, and in dealing with it at the time and in the aftermath. So those were the kind of the defining features of a very tragic outcome. I think the lessons today would be as valuable to us today in the current situation as they were back then. I think we still recognize coming through this COVID-19 situation, although it's very different because while that was a situation in 2008, there was a situation of our own making for which we were directly accountable. This was not. This is a kind of a world pandemic, and we had to behave in a way that reflected our values as well, but it was a kind of a different circumstance. In this particular case, the most important thing to us has been protecting our people first, right? And we were early adopters of protocols inside the organization. We recognized that early on, again, because of those commitments, that we needed to be very aggressive in adopting protocols inside our supply chain that protected our people. We were also simultaneously recognized as an essential service. So that meant we had to continue to operate as critical infrastructure in the middle of this. And I think that's a very important decision. As has been said often in society, that you're only 3 meals away from a revolution. And at the end of the day, making sure through a time like this that there's adequate food supply and that the food system continues to operate is really, really important. But we had to do that while making sure that our priority was protecting the health and safety of our people. I think similar, consistent with our company values and culture, we were very action oriented. We were very decisive through the middle of it. In the early stages, we acted very quickly in our establishing of a crisis team and applying all those protocols throughout the supply chain. But we also recognized our role in society through this. Again, a part of that kind of that shared value ethos in the organization. We made sure that we compensated the people in the front line of our organization fairly. Recognizing the heroes that they were in keeping the supply chain working. We committed to significant additional resources, I think close to $1.5 million additional resources through the Center for Action and Food Security, because there were many vulnerable parts of our society that had that their plight was accentuated through this pandemic, and we needed to play a role supporting them. So we upped our commitment through the Center for Action and Food Security to support that. But we also recognized that genuine heroes in our midst were on the front line of the healthcare system, and we invested $2.5 million in the Frontline Fund to support healthcare workers across the country. So it was about our first priority of protecting our people, but also being very decisive and action-oriented, ensuring that while we did that, that our supply chain continued to operate and in balance to all of the other stakeholders supported the other vulnerable communities. I think throughout this pandemic. We are very blessed and grateful for the fact that our business and our people were largely safe and secure through this. And so I know there are many others where that's not the case, and we're certainly empathetic to that situation. Yeah. So is lots of learning is going to come out of this. We're now looking at we try and be very forward-looking in these things, and we're now looking at what the lasting impacts will be on the food system, on society, on kind of work 2.0, if you will, the future of work and how that all unfolds. So there'll be lots of reflections and lessons learned as well, Marty, out of this.
No, for sure, and many of them, I think, as it settles out, for the better. But what do you see, since we're talking about the future, Michael, as critical to aligning your people and culture and continuing to attract new talent in Maple Leaf's high performance culture in this 2.0 kind of world that we're in and going to find ourselves further in, I think, for time to come?
Well, that's a great question. It's a very timely question, Marty, because one of the things that is super important to our DNA is this idea of constantly it's part of our culture, is constantly reinventing ourselves. Mm-hmm. Constantly, we reinvent ourselves strategically. We reinvent ourselves as individuals and personal growth. It's just this continuous reinvention, if you will, is an important part of our ethos. We began this journey of very proactive culture and leadership values management, if you will, as our core asset, as the most important asset of the organization in 1999, and we articulated our values in 1999. In 2009, we refresh them. And we do it in an evolutionary way, but not a revolutionary way, because it has to be something of a natural continuum. But there was a really important refresh in 2009. We're on the cusp right now of recognizing what's going on today in our organization strategically, where our people are at today, and what the future of the enterprise will likely look like. And we're just now on the cusp of relaunching our values, actually, 10 years after the last iteration, again in an evolutionary sort of a way. There are a couple of themes that we're building into the fabric of our culture and values. The first is we're making a very overt connection from our stated strategy, which is to be the most sustainable protein company on earth, and our values. So we're updating the language to reflect that ethos of shared value and the strategy of sustainability into the cultural expression. And secondly, we have made over the last several years, but it was not called out in as overt a way as we feel the future of our organization needs it to be. And certainly recent events, as tragic as they've been, would suggest that we should have done this years ago. So we're probably slow, but we're calling out the role of diversity and inclusion in our values in a much more profoundly important way matching with the commitments we've made in our actions, but really calling it out specifically in our culture. So those are two dimensions. We're also kind of bringing some of the in that evolutionary kind of thought or way, bringing the language of our values up to kind of a 2020 in a 2020 update as well. And I'm 61 years old today. I continue to work hard to reinvent myself, but it gets harder and harder to stay current with the millennials and making sure that the language that expresses our culture through our values reflects the language and what's important to the next generation of leaders at Maple Leaf, and we're doing that at the same time. So I think that what'll happen, the future of our business and therefore our culture will be defined by another next generation of leaders. It'll be defined by our commitment to sustainability, and it'll be defined by the absolute imperative to go well beyond the language of diversity and inclusion and actually make that real inside our organization. And so those are the themes that we're kind of following in this next generation of culture management at Maple Leaf.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because you've constantly stayed on top of, let's call it this evolution, and I would argue led in many, many ways. And I think you're probably doing it again. And so, sustainability, most sustainable, protein company in the world, that's an exceptional value. Diversity, inclusion, and embedding that through the organization. Another, is there anything else that you see as kind of coming in this transition in terms of trends, workplace, et cetera, organizations that want to sustain
still learning
performance?
Yeah, I think in the workplace we're still learning what kind of work 2.0 is going to look like.
Right.
I think the big aha from the pandemic in our workflows is that this kind of virtual thing that we're doing right now actually is working pretty well.
Isn't it?
It is. It's kind of working pretty well to a lot of people's surprise. I think organizations, I'm hearing is a pretty constant theme across most businesses in the country, that they were surprised at how quick the transition became, how smooth the transition became, and how productive they continued to be through this experience. I think what we don't know, Marty, going forward in Work 2.0 is exactly how this is going to play out in the hybrid world, right? So clearly, some of the work protocols that were rooted in the environment of you have to be here to get anything done, that's gone, right? You don't have to be there to get anything done. That's gone. But what we know is that working when everybody's present, check. We know that working when everybody's virtual, check. What we're a little unsure of is in the hybrid solution, when half of them are present and half of them are virtual, is that going to be the same? And that's probably the next generation of how we work together, is figuring out that hybrid solution so that everybody in the dialogue of getting shit done is treated equally, and their voices are all heard, whether they are in the room, which many of them will be, or they're on a screen at the end of the room.
Right.
So we're still working through that in terms of what that looks like. There's some technology advances that will facilitate that. We're re-engineering our workspaces right now. We'll probably require half or less of the office space going forward than what we need today, half or less. But the half that remains is going to be configured for this hybrid virtual world. world
Yeah, right.
to maximize people's performance in that kind of environment. So we're kind of, I would caution you, I don't think we know the answer to what that looks like today. I don't think anybody knows what that looks like, but I know that most organizations are thinking through what that's going to look like in the future, and it's definitely going to be different than what it was in the past. I know there
No,
are,
absolutely.
you know, one of the most important attributes is not just what the business needs, but also what the personal circumstances are of the individual. Because while productivity has been fine for the most part, in fact, probably many would say it's probably been better actually through this, which is, you know, a real kind of awakening. Not everybody loves it equally. You know, if you are, you know, if you're a young family, two professionals in the home, kind of with you know, young children, particularly when they've had to homeschool them. I mean, the stress on those young families has been acute. You know, me being a little more mature, you know, I don't have young children around today. You know, I can set up an office in 3 minutes anywhere that I happen to be. You know, I actually kind of like it. I was commuting 2 hours a day, you know, back and forth to the Meadowvale office. It's actually, there's some, you know, while I miss the personal connection, I miss that a lot. You know, I don't miss the drive. So there's, you know, I think the personal circumstances will be, you know, part of the future. You know, we'll have to see how that all unfolds over the next few years.
And it's a real opportunity. I think, Michael, your description of the hybrid world, we don't know how to figure it out. We're at the center of it, being asked all the time with this change in workplace culture. And we certainly don't have near all the answers. We're figuring it out ourselves.
Yeah.
But I do believe that there will be a place for the workplace as a culture builder, as a face-to-face place. Can you make that the connector to those who are virtual is absolutely going to be the key. And those who do it better than others will win.
The one thing we found, because we are so dedicated to leadership development, the one thing that we found in the virtual world that you just simply cannot replace is it's a terrible environment for assessing and coaching talent, right? You can communicate, yes. But if you really want to get to know talent and you really want to see them in action, it involves, you know, interpretations of not just their language or their ideas, but their body language and the entire, you know, the entirety of the individual. And there's an element of in the coaching and assessment component of that. There's an element of you got to be there, and you know, we're very mindful of that. So kind of Zoom or Microsoft Teams are great platforms for communicating, not so much necessarily for talent development.
Well, I've got one final question for you, Michael, and that is, you've been a great mentor to many, many, many people, as we talked about earlier. But if you were going to give one piece of advice to someone looking to start their leadership journey in a high performance culture, build a business as an entrepreneur or lead in a professional environment, what would you share with them today in terms of what you've learned over the years of culture and its impact on performance?
Yeah. Well, I get, you know, inside our organization, I get asked that a lot, Marty. And I think the one, if you wanted to distill it down to one piece of advice, I think it would be own it, right? It's just, you can't, this is not a delegatable kind of a thing, right? It's as a leader, you need to own it. And that ownership comes in lots of different forms. It comes in your participation in defining the culture, your ownership of defining the culture that you aspire to. It comes in your participation and engagement in teaching that culture as you kind of see it unfold in your organization. And it comes with owning it in terms of your own personal behavior, to make sure that, you know, that even though you define it and you teach it, that your actions will ultimately be the story behind the story of culture development in the organization. So owning your own behaviors that are aligned with that culture is you know, is absolutely essential. So, you know, I would say very simply that if you believe, as I do, that the culture how people behave when you're not looking is the single most important job of a leader. Owning that behavior broadly throughout your organization is really, really important. Then, you got to own it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Just a few things that have resonated with me today. This has been absolutely great. It takes me back a lot of years when I interviewed you for this, but
we're aging, Marty.
Yeah,
We're aging.
well, I know it does happen. It does happen. But really, how really the focus has been of culture as an enabler, of people, of leadership, of the behaviors, of performance. It has really defined Maple Leaf, and I know a lot of it comes from you and your colleagues and your commitment to it over the years. To know that you're now leading the charge in sustainable development of food, and diversity and inclusion, and looking very closely at what's this hybrid kind of model going to be. But I think the best thing we left to last, and that is leaders need to own it, whether they're in their early career, their late career. And there's no one, I think, maybe you haven't have an original idea, but you sure know how to execute it and you know how to live it, because no one really in the modern era has lived it like Michael McCain and Maple Leaf Foods, in the good times and in the bad times. And it's really been an inspiration for organizations like ours who've made our way on culture. So thank you.
I appreciate that. I do pass that hat around to all of my team, because I think one of the things that we do well is that we collectively own it together as a senior leadership team. And so while I play a role, I've had the privilege of working with some very talented people over the years, and we've all owned that together. Listen,
I think Maple Leaf Foods is aptly named because I think you operate in such a way that is so distinctly Canadian. And as someone who has their roots in Nova Scotia, I'm awfully proud every time I learn things from the McCains, Michael McCain particularly, and Maple Leaf Foods. So thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Marty. I appreciate it. You have a great day.
You too. So join us next week for another episode of Building High Performance Cultures. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about this, please visit waterstonehc.com.